All right, next up I have Deborah Matteliano and Carl Orsbourn. Excited to have you both here and at the On-Site Food On Demand podcast.
Great to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Amazing. And so they just got off of a great AI panel where they broke down some practical solutions for AI, and I want to touch a little bit on that today. But first, can you guys introduce yourselves to our listeners? We're familiar with you both big fans of you both at Food On Demand, but for anyone new, a little about what you do for your role and who you are.
Go for it, Carl.
Oh, wow. I was going to say ladies first. Very good. Carl Orsbourn, lovely to meet you all. My background actually is in convenience store retail. Used to run a 1,000-unit chain before going into the world of ghost kitchens with Kitchen United, helping them scale. But then I wrote 2 books with my co-author Meredith Sandland around the digitization of the industry, delivering the digital restaurant on Amazon and all other good bookstores, and the path to digital maturity. Those books came out during the height of the pandemic when restaurants had to embrace e-commerce and everything attributed to the challenges that came at that time, but hopefully helps restaurants figure out their journey. Since then, I've been involved in a number of advisory roles. I've co-founded my own startup in the dynamic pricing space. These days, I'm at a company called Invisible Technologies, where I'm helping them launch our kind of go-to-market for enterprise for those organizations trying to deploy AI in a transformative fashion, really thinking through the overall AI journey and thinking about how we can help them solve the most complex challenges using agentic workflows, data platforms, and an expert marketplace of over 6,000 human experts. So it's a really fun challenge to be involved in something which is still really at the precipice of where we're heading. So yeah, today we had a really good conversation about it, and I'm sure we'll get into it today.
Yeah, thank you so much. On to
Hi,
you.
Deborah Matteliano. I am the global head for restaurants and food tech at AWS, and we work with 90% of the world's largest QSRs and 100% of the world's largest food delivery brands, which gives us a front row seat into all the emerging AI use cases coming down the pike. And what's special about AWS is we are the infrastructure behind a lot of the AI. We help the data unification, the data cleansing, and all of the structure components that restaurants, operators, and food tech brands need to deploy AI use cases at scale. So we work on everything that you'd think Amazon might work on, everything from supply chain optimization to operational efficiency to customer experience and personalization. We bring that to restaurants, and we're excited to be here today.
I love it. Well, thank you both so much. Yes, I want to pick your brain on some things you guys talked about on your panel. But first, just looking industry-wide and how different the restaurant industry is even just a few years ago, speaking of technology and AI, which is a big topic at this conference, what is top of mind for operators right now, or what are you guys seeing in the space that's evolving as of recently?
We started our panel today with a picture of Dorothy with the Tin Man at the edge of the yellow brick road. And I started by saying, look, everyone is talking about they're on the way to Oz to meet the wizard of agentic AI. And I think that's probably the sentiment that's come across through the whole conference, right? Everyone's super excited about this. They go, yeah, we need to do it. I've got my kids helping me use ChatGPT. But how to apply it into the restaurant space is challenging, and it's difficult for people to necessarily see it beyond this kind of mystical being. And I think what we tried to do today was to try and dispel some of those myths by also showing the importance of human collaboration, the importance of a lot of the things that were attributed to many technologies over the last decade around data and infrastructure. And I think that really was hopefully helpful for the operators that I spoke to before, who were saying, yeah, I get it, but I just don't see why I need it right now. I don't see the ROI story. And there's so many people selling me this solution or that solution. There's tons of startups here selling AI this and AI that. It's almost back to where we started with food on demand, right? Where everyone was selling off-premise food technologies in different ways, but now it's with AI attributed to it. So I think it's a little bit of confusion out there, and I'm hoping we did a good enough job, Deborah, of trying to help them through it a bit.
We did our best to demystify, and I think there's a couple things from a human to technology interaction component that are worth breaking down further. We talked a little bit about humans interacting with the AI, and what a lot of folks don't know is even with drive-thru AI, about 15% of the time is the average that a human needs to interact with the AI beyond just the voice AI taking the order. So, you're going to get the human in the loop 15% of the time. When Taco Bell deployed voice AI to about 400 stores, they found that it took down 3 seconds per order, which is great. That's millions of dollars in savings when you think about that across an ecosystem, and we shared that on the panel. But what they didn't expect is that employee satisfaction scores went up. So people were happier working in the Taco Bells that had voice AI, even though they did have to become a human in the loop 15% of the time. That 15% is far less straining. You haven't had to argue with customers for 3 hours, but you do that 2 minutes to clarify something. You're a lot more energized. You're a lot more customer centric. So it's interesting when operators say, well, why would we do this? Oftentimes the why doesn't happen until you kind of start the implementation, and then there's these little known benefits that come as a result.
I kind of encourage the audience to dream big, to think beyond just productivity and efficiency gains, which a lot of people see as like that's what AI is. But you think of any digital transformation over these last 10, 15, longer quite honestly, typically you get bigger levels of change and acceptance when you see top line being impacted. And I think, yes, voice AI has definitely been one of the things that we've seen through the drive-thru channel that's come to the fore. But ultimately, if you bring this back to the human level, if we think about the hustle of our GMs in our restaurants today and what they're doing, that hustle and their ability to think in the moment, trying to take a whole range of different data points to make a decision, that's tough, that's stressful. It's probably the reason why it's a really difficult industry to keep GMs in their job. And so the idea of being able to help them on that journey by giving them recommendations, by being able to use the connection points of data with an idea of being able to help them make better decisions, that's going to help our GMs be able to spend more time in front of their team, training them, helping them understand more about the brand and its promise, but also with our customers, and therefore improving a better experience. So a lot of these things are almost a step or two down the line of actually implementing AI, but if you dream big and actually deploy in a way that can ultimately help humans be better at what they do, that's a win for everyone.
Yeah, and I think we had a great keynote conversation with Adam Brotman and Andy Sack of Forum 3 that kicked off the Food on Demand conference, where they were, giving pretty basic use cases you can use now. They were talking ChatGPT and things. Circling back to the data question, what are ways that restaurants can leverage AI for data? You just mentioned that, but any real use cases or anything you can mention from restaurants you've talked to or worked with?
One of the biggest things right now we're seeing is supply chain. So every restaurant wants to protect itself against the risk or the threat of tariffs. So how do we use supply chain data and ingredient data to form predictive algorithms on what's going to be in demand, especially with limited time offers? We have this ecosystem where you have more limited time offers than ever, more promotions than ever, and also more strained supply chain than ever. So how do you, make those two coincide? How do you put out a limited time offer that has a high chance of going viral and a low chance of straining your supply chain at the same time, that maybe doesn't need avocados that are only available in Mexico? So, some of that predictive data modeling can be helpful even with, these real worlds and international affairs types of problems.
Yeah. I think it's about connecting data domains that sometimes don't necessarily make sense as to why to connect. So, for example, you take inventory. So if you've got one data domain that has an appreciation of the inventory in place, and then tie that to the marketing team. It's like, well, what are you doing here, Carl? Why are you tying inventory to the marketing team? Well, if I'm going to put out a particular social post for a particular restaurant on Friday night that's driving attention to a new LTO, if I don't anticipate the shift that's going to happen to my inventory as a result of that, and by the way, we know that we don't always talk to each other in the ways that we would like, and so therefore maybe that memo just didn't get across to the team to ensure they've got enough items in stock to be able to service this Friday night rush that we hope to happen. Again, all of this stuff could happen in the background to drive these types of outcomes, which are ultimately going to lead to a better revenue for the restaurant.
Yeah. Absolutely. Anything else you guys want to touch on AI in general before I move on to some other questions? I think we had a lot of points, but knowing you just got off a panel, I'm sure there's things top of mind.
Look, I think the big thing that I'll just come back to is dreaming big enough, but also recognizing this is very much an infrastructure platform type of opportunity. There are a ton, I think I said 8,600 AI startups out there selling point solutions. And I put up this image on the slide early on of this rather convoluted Lego brick representation of the tech stack. And if you and I were to go to the Lego store right now and buy 20 different models and then be told, all right, make a I don't know, a TV or something out of it, the chances are it's probably going to be uglier than a TV Lego model itself that's been built for purpose. And so for those people that are really thinking about encouraging a real digital strategy which is encompassing AI throughout every department, start by thinking holistically. Start by making sure that you've got an understanding of the platform and architecture needed to really thrive in this space. And then dream big about the use cases of what can happen by asking yourselves and each of your department heads these questions. What would you do if you had 100 extra people in your team? What would you put them on? How would they be able to do what they do today better? That kind of question can open up ideation that makes them think about the opportunity in a way that perhaps takes us beyond how do I write an email better in ChatGPT. And that's the right place to start, because when you do that, you can tie it back to these business outcomes. And once you can do that, you can talk to the ROI story. Once you can do that, you can get the investment to address the infrastructure.
No notes, Carl. And I'd only add that AWS can be the platform infrastructure to help organizations do all of that at scale and in a global way and with agility and cost effectiveness.
Amazing. Well, thank you for the breakdown on the AI. That was incredible and easy to understand. So I think that's important for our listeners. We're at Food on Demand, and a big coverage of what we do is delivery and everything off premises. I want to pick both your brains on where do you see us right now in the meal delivery space, and what has changed, or what are you looking forward to as it continues to innovate?
Ooh. So a lot of the innovative AI use cases actually come from the food tech brands, and
right.
not everyone realizes that. With our global business, oftentimes the food tech brands have really large engine development teams, and they're coming out with these use cases and using data and insights in a way that even teaches us what to do and helps us bring those use cases to bear with operators. So from a food tech perspective, a couple emerging use cases, everyone talks personalization, but the level of personalization and search optimization at scale that's happening in food delivery apps is pretty remarkable. So things like semantic search, especially as food delivery apps have become larger platforms that assume all kinds of merchants and even other organizations. Think of DoorDash purchasing Deliveroo. What's really interesting is helping the customer actually navigate the apps. So if you were to go into DoorDash and search yogurt, do you mean Faye Greek yogurt or Chobani? Or do you mean yogurt sauce for a curry dish that you want to purchase? So there's all these different ways that folks are starting to interact with these apps, and the apps need to learn how people search. If that makes sense. They need to learn how to speak the languages that maybe we won't name the item, but we're saying cheap rosé, or maybe we're saying wine, but we really mean is cheap rosé to bring to this picnic. So sort of becoming smarter in terms of search is a really big one. Personalization across dietary restrictions. My apps have now learned that I have celiac. So they're recommending not only gluten-free dishes on DoorDash, but also how do I get Wegmans delivery for the hot gluten-free items of the week, which is much appreciated as someone who cannot always eat from the QSRs that I support. So those are some of the emerging use cases that I'm seeing.
Yeah, incredible.
Shout out to Lucy Logan at Everybite.
Yes.
Have you come across Lucy? Because obviously that I think is a big area which I'm super excited about in terms of personalization from a nutrition standpoint. I don't know. I think we had the panel from Black Box and Lisa Miller and the Business of Joy all talking about the fact that we're still in this high inflation environment and people are actually choosing delivery less. So I think we've also got to recognize that the forecast right now is that we've got a tough year ahead of ourselves. You talked about tariffs, we've got all the kind of challenges that again continue to put this industry to test. I think what that means though is that delivery has to continue to add more value. right? We can't rest on our laurels in this space. And I think there's a lot of opportunity and excitement when you think about the different delivery modes that are coming around. We had servo robotics here at the conference. We've had Wing here at the conference. You hear about the ways in which those companies are collaborating together in Texas. I think it might be with Walmart and like being able to have the servo robotic take a dish out to a Wing dispatch spot and fly it to a customer's doorstep. And that again isn't about, and I think this was mentioned on the panel, this isn't about replacing drivers. This is actually about taking the trips that drivers don't want to take because the tip is low or perhaps the journey just doesn't make sense for them. We need to get drivers and delivery to happen, so we've got 4 to 5 deliveries happening an hour. At the moment, I think it's something like 2 on average. So that is not going to make the overall delivery value system work as well as we'd like to. Otherwise, what's going to happen is we're going to have to build our restaurants to be more optimally positioned for pickup, which is happening as well. And we've got other vendors here, like Apex, for example, with their boxes for pickup. And those types of things I think are important. What that's also meaning is restaurants are continuing to have to iterate on the design of their restaurants. In the first book, we talked about the drive-thru and how the drive-thru window had to be built, and then the operation inside the kitchen having to be built where the fries and the drinks had to be located in such a space where it was only 2 steps for the expo to reach the drive-thru window. We've got to think about that same mentality when it comes to off-premise, so that the pickup experience is seamless, so that we are making sure that our restaurants are located in a way with good ingress and egress to be able to get in and out. That's why we're seeing multiple drive-through lanes or pickup lanes, right? All these things are happening in the industry, and that's super exciting. I think the last thing I'll mention, and I think this is to your point about customer experience, is we've got to find a way to, again, make this easier for customers. The best out there is Amazon. Every one of our Amazon homepages is different. So why shouldn't each of our menus be different? How can we create a menu that's different depending on where we are at a different time of day, so our omni-channel experience is reflecting that? So it knows that when I leave the gym, I might want a refreshing drink, right? If it knows, as you pointed out, if I'm going to a park for an event, that I might need a bottle of wine or some flowers to be delivered to the home to help me get that gift for my host. Those types of things, that type of intelligence to be able to support the customer journey, that's going to create more of a super app type of experience. We've had Wonder here, right, with Jason talk about the vertically integrated restaurant, much like Meredith was doing with Cluster Truck before. Right. These ideas, I think, are showing that there's a lot of things to be excited about in the space. And I'm hoping the industry and podcasts like this, and the one that you've both been on with mine, The Digital Restaurant, where you've both been guest hosts, where we talk about these success stories, and that the people that come to conferences like this really start to pick up on those best practices and put them into test themselves, because a lot of the great ideas often start right here.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned, what was discussed at the robotic panel, because that stuck out to me too when he said, we need to make delivery worth it, as you mentioned, and there are many orders that are too small for a driver to want to pick it up, and a robot could come in for that. So, any comment you have on when we think of autonomous food delivery? There's drones, there's robots, sidewalk robots. What's your take?
There's a lot of different structural and operational components that folks don't always think about. Yeah. How robots handle weather and how they handle people trying to steal them or destroy them. So amidst all the excitement, there's also sort of the realities of deploying robots at scale. But what I think would be really interesting to see long term is a concept like Kernel, where you have a robotic make line that hands off the food to a robot that then delivers to a person. Now that's the full robotic food chain of the future.
I think BurgerBot, was that the one that's just launched last week in California, is a kind of a vending machine where everything is made all the way through and it's inside an actual restaurant. So there are folks that are starting to think about this and to try and deploy it. The biggest thing I think, Bernadette, is, and the guy from Serve mentioned this, it's really expensive. And so you've got to think about the supply chain to make the robots in the first place. And again, in the tariff environment, the uncertainty that's being caused right now because of that, I think that's creating a nervousness out there. What does that also then lean into? It leans into investor nervousness around what you might want to put your money into. And so I think there are going to be places, certain dense environments, where you're going to see more robotics play a role. I think there are going to be more rural locations where you're going to see a role. But I think for the majority of us, the drive is still going to be the core mode of delivery.
Yeah.
I would add one more thing on that, because I think you're right. Automation is sort of the cure for tariffs in a way that it's maybe offsetting some of the labor strains and some of the strained margins. And then we're seeing folks move away from automation, even though we have the tariff pressure looming. So that's been kind of an interesting dichotomy that we're navigating. But back to the expense, a lot of folks don't realize that most robotic systems are completely customized, and they have to be streaming real-time data back to a cloud to even work. This is not just happening in a vacuum. There's whole systems behind these, and if you look at Miso Robotics, every single one of their implementations is a custom retrofit for a restaurant. So every restaurant has a different design, different sort of shapes within the four walls. How do we create robotic arms that don't hit an employee? Mm-hmm. How do we create these safely? And how do you do that at scale when every robot needs to be retrofitted in a certain way? So it is expensive right now. I would love to see more investment long term to scale this out, and with economies of scale, hopefully make it more accessible for operators and customers.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly excited to see where we'll be at with this conversation, even maybe in 5 years, because I'm surprised we're even here now talking about drone delivery and robotic sidewalk delivery. So, well, thank you guys so much. These are just short little mini interviews, but anything else you want to mention? I'd like to actually wrap up with the importance of connecting in-person industry events, podcasts, coming conferences. Obviously, I'm biased, but there's many shows out there. Just what's the value behind that? You guys are attendees and moderators and speakers, so you have a wealth of opinions here.
Relationships, right? Yeah. It kind of comes back to thinking back to the pandemic, and yes, we were connecting through Zoom screens and MS Teams and but it's nothing like being in person. I mean, Deborah and I have known each other for years. We met for the first time today, right? So
first time in person too.
So this kind of gives you the idea of why conferences are important, and it allows you to obviously talk shop, but it also allows you to build relationships and get to know each other, because this is an industry of friends. Everyone is actually, while there are some competitors, there are actually folks that want everyone to win, and I think that's the spirit of hospitality coming through as well. And so I think food on demand has been pivotal to helping the technology journey for restaurateurs think about it, not just for off-premise, but actually across the board. But I think it's also something which is enabling those folks to come together, to ideate, to talk about their concerns, to talk about the risks that they're thinking about taking, but then ultimately, hopefully, to empower them to take that step and to be the drivers of innovation and the future we're trying to build for the industry.
Anything to add? No worries if not.
I would echo the sentiments on hospitality. We're all passionate about hospitality, which means maybe we're more passionate about offering to each other in person too, because that's ultimately where the human connection takes place. And I think it was Danny Meyer said in his book that hospitality is when you feel as though something is being given to you, and the lack of hospitality is when you feel as though something is being taken away. And these are moments where we can give to each other in whole new ways by knowing each other better and weave experiences for each other that we often seek to give to our customers and partners.
Well, thank you both so much for being on the podcast, and I look forward to continuing staying connected, and thank you so much.
Of course.
Thanks, Bernadette.